Good morning. And it's Bible study time again, Calvary Baptist Church. I hope you're up and around. There's no snow here, there's no ice here, and it's not even raining, even though it looks a little ugly out. But we're up. We're in church today. We're looking forward to a great day. Beverly Hilton has come. She's the WMU up in our area, and she's come. We're going to do our mission study later on after worship, and so we're excited about that. And we're also excited because we're starting a new unit in our Sunday school. And this unit is entitled A Name Like No Other. And, we kind of take things for granted sometimes. Our English language is so, hodgepodge in so many ways that we don't always, really understand what words mean. And boy, if you don't believe that's true, just listen to a politician. I don't think they understand what words mean. But same could be said about theologians sometimes too. So I'm not going to get real critical there. But name like no other, the name of God. God's name. Who is God? And how descriptive is that? And what do we learn about his person and his character simply in his name? Well, we're going to start there today with the importance of God's name. And we're going to go back to Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to look at where God spoke to Moses through a burning bush. Remember, the bush was on fire, but it wasn't consumed. And he spoke to Moses, and then out of that, God called Moses out to go and to be instrumental in delivering his people out of bondage in Egypt. So let's just dive right in. And remember, the title is The Importance of God's Name. And, there's importance in every name. Every object has a name. Every person has a name. God has a name. There's importance in that. And we need to learn the value of that. So, Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. We're going to see where God is a holy God, and we are to approach him with reverential fear. It says, meanwhile, Moses was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire within a bush. And Moses looked, and he saw that the bush was on fire, but it was not consumed. So Moses thought, I must go over and look at this remarkable sight. Why isn't this bush burning up? And when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, he answered. Do not come any closer, he said. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And then he continued, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So God is a holy God, and we must approach him with reverential fear. Now, I want to be brief and giving you a little bit of background. We know that we go back to the very first few chapters of Genesis, and we see beginnings. We see how God created, how God made man in his image. We see how God rested. Then we see how things begin to play out with God's creation. And so we see God making covenants with people. He made a covenant with Adam. He made a covenant with Noah. He made a covenant with Abraham. And not only with Abraham, but Abraham's seed, Abraham's descendants, Isaac and Jacob and Joseph. And so now here we are with Moses. You know the story. You probably do if you've ever watched Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments. You know what happened. God made and God called out people, and God provided for the needs of his people. He took care of them. He protected them. Now, hear that well, because we've got a big conflict going on over in the Middle East, and I don't know why anybody would ever want to be against God's people. History is not on your side. God has always protected. God has always taken care of, and will always protect and take care of his people. And so just hear me out well there. So he's a God who is holy. We must approach him with reverential fear. So here's Moses. Think about him briefly. And what's interesting about the book of Exodus, it starts with the verses that say, there rose up a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. The Pharaoh who came into power didn't recognize Joseph, and more importantly, he didn't recognize Joseph's God. And so what happened out of this was he began to see the Israelites and think, whoa, these people, they're taking over. Whoa, these people, what are they? What are they doing here? And they're not Egyptians. And so what are we going to do to control them? Well, they began to put um, uh, authority over them. They began to make slaves out of them. They began to bring down as taskmasters unbearable responsibilities upon them. And so they made them work. They made them work um, for no reward, pretty much. And then we see in chapter 2 the birth of Moses, and we see where he is hidden. He is seems to be the natural candidate to be the redeemer to get them out, but things take a kind of a rough turn, don't they? First of all, Pharaoh's going to kill all the boy babies, and so they had to hide him in the Nile River, and then God took care of that, and Pharaoh's daughter is the one who found him, and she raised him as a really a prince in Pharaoh's court. And so then what happens then? Looks like things are just going to work out great, and then all of a sudden, he I wouldn't say he made a mistake, but I would say he got pretty angry because he saw a Egyptian beating a Hebrew to death, and it set him off, and he killed the Egyptian. And then the Hebrews didn't trust him because they knew he was one of them, but he really wasn't one of them. And so they said to him, "You're going to kill me too," when they weren't quite doing what they were supposed to be doing. And then the word got back to Pharaoh, and Moses was afraid for his life, and so he fled. He ran, and he got out in the wilderness, and he was there. He had met a man named Jethro, who was a Midianite. But we get the impression through all of this that while Jethro was a Midianite, he wasn't an Israelite. He wasn't a Hebrew. But he was a God-fearer. He understood who Yahweh God was. And we don't know the history of that. That might be a good question to ask when you get to heaven. What was Jethro really? But he appeared to be someone who feared God. And so we would call him a God-fearer. We would call him maybe a proselyte or something along that line. So that's first 2 chapters. And now we get to the 3rd chapter. And really, this has been about 80 years of Moses' life in 2 chapters. So then we're going to get to chapter 3. And in chapter 3, we're going to go through the next 40 years of Moses' life and through the whole rest of the chapter, or the whole rest of the book of Exodus. And so we kind of focus in on, a lot of things happen, but then we get to the real meat of it. So here's Moses. He's out tending the sheep of his father-in-law Jethro. He went from Pharaoh's court all the way down to be a sheep herder, and not just any sheep herder, but they're not even his sheep. He didn't even own any of it. They're just his father-in-law's. He marries this guy's daughter, and he kind of gets in the fold somehow. So here he is. He's tending the sheep. He sees this bush, and it gets his attention. He's been out there in the wilderness. He's been around God-fearing people, but he may not have really gotten this depth of a relationship with God, or he may be slipping at some point with this. He doesn't understand. He gets there and he realizes the bush is not consumed, and he gets confronted by Almighty God. Now just think about this for a moment. Here's Moses. He went from being somebody to being nobody, and yet who still knows his name? God does. God still knows his name. God still knows all about him. And God calls him out personally in that way. He tells him, you need to respond the right way to this bush, because I'm in the bush, and you need to respond to this in the proper way. And that is, you're on holy ground. Why does God demand that? Was it because the ground really was holy and sacred and whatever? No, it was the presence of God that made it that way. It was the presence of God, and God wanted to teach Moses a lesson that while in his life he may not have fully understood everything about God, he's about to learn it. He's about to get it, and it begins with reverential fear. And so when we approach God, we must approach him with reverence, with awe, with fear. God said, don't come any closer. You might say, take your hush puppies off. I don't know how you'd respond to that. But God said to him, I am this person. This is who I am. I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Now, I've only got a couple of minutes here, and I wish I could just really go off into a real tangent here, but I can't. But the thing is, Moses had the greatest heritage, didn't he? He was a Hebrew. And he had the greatest opportunity. He was raised in Pharaoh's court in Egypt, and Egypt was one of the most powerful lands in the history of the world at that time. He had the greatest opportunities physically, but spiritually, he had an even deeper, greater heritage. He had a greater legacy. And I'm just saying here, if you get nothing else out of this, what's more important, the legacy that you leave in your bloodline, or the legacy that you leave spiritually behind you? Think about that. That's what matters most. Family tree is more than bloodline. Family tree is, what good is your bloodline if every descendant of yours is a skunk? Why do we want that? What matters most is the spiritual aspect and not the bloodline. That's what really matters. And so here's Moses. Well, I got about 2 minutes left, people. We skip a couple verses and we go to verses 9 through 12. It says, so because the Israelites' cry for help has come to me, and I've also seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them, therefore go, I am sending you to Pharaoh so that you may lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses asked God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And he said, I will certainly be with you. And this will be the sign to you that I am the one who sent you. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will all worship God at this mountain. And that's the greatest promise any of us could ever get, isn't it? In verse 12, when God said, I will certainly be with you. God is on your side. Who can be against you? So we can trust God that he will do what he says he will do. Now, folks, a lot of people want to discredit the Bible. They want to get rid of it. They want to destroy it. And not because of its spiritual nature, because they don't even understand that part. But they want to get rid of it because of its actual, physical, historical nature. Because it tells the truth about history. Because it tells them everything that they need to know that they want to deny. And that is that God is in control. He's the creator of all things. And he said to Moses, it doesn't matter what kind of excuse you're going to make up. It doesn't matter how much you're going to try to stand against or not go with. I'm going to send you to do this. And when God speaks, why wouldn't you accept? Why wouldn't you go? And so Moses said, who am I going to say that sent me? What am I going to say to Pharaoh? Well, I think he was concerned that Pharaoh wouldn't understand. But even more so than in the next few verses, it says, beginning in verse 13, that Moses asked God, if I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? And God replied to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered in every generation. God has revealed himself to Moses in a more powerful way than perhaps he ever has before. And he is saying to him, look, you don't need to worry about Pharaoh. I'm going to take care of him. You don't need to worry about the Israelites, even though, the poor Moses, he's in a terrible fix. The Egyptians don't want him. They're going to kill him if he goes back, maybe. The Israelites don't want him because they've already rejected him. They don't see him as one of them. Who's he aligned with? Where is he? What's he got? Well, he's got his brother Aaron. We're going to find out when he gets back. But most of all, he's got God. God is on his team. God is on his side. And you're to say to the Israelites, I am who I am. And we could go into detail a lot about that. Matter of fact, we may in the next few weeks. But we're out of time today. And so the lesson for us out of this is the importance of God's name is extremely critical, that we understand it, that we get it down. The bush burned, but it wasn't consumed because God is powerful enough to keep a bush from consuming. Think about it. What was that saying to Moses? Pretty powerful message, isn't it? That God's more powerful than anything he's ever seen, anything he's ever dealt with. God is able to do more than man could ever comprehend. Great message, isn't it? Well, God bless you all. Approach the Lord with reverence and fear. Bye-bye.